Communities in coastal New Hampshire are already dealing with impacts from coastal flooding. These impacts are projected to worsen due to a changing climate. Flooding impacts all of us, whether we're right on the coast or further inland. The effects of sea level rise, storms, and more extreme rain events put roads, public and private buildings, natural resources, and people at risk. The latest scientific information on coastal flooding for New Hampshire was updated in 2019. The New Hampshire Coastal Flood Risk Summary, Part 1, Science, provides the state of the science related to coastal flood risks in New Hampshire. It gives updated projections of sea level rise, coastal storms, groundwater rise, precipitation, and freshwater flooding for coastal New Hampshire over the next century. The report was developed by top scientists here in New Hampshire, with input from local technical experts, climate adaptation practitioners, and external reviewers. This information is the scientific foundation for the companion New Hampshire Coastal Flood Risk Summary Part 2, Guidance for Using Scientific Projections, which helps to inform coastal land use planning and decision-making. Let's take a look at what the science report says. We know that sea levels are rising in New Hampshire and are projected to continue to rise for centuries. Sea levels are rising as a result of ocean warming, combined with melting glaciers and ice sheets. Local tide gauge data show that sea level has risen about 7.5 to 8 inches from 1912 to 2018. King tide events, like the ones documented in these images, are the highest astronomical tides of the year. These give us a glimpse of what normal water levels could be like in the future. In addition to these more extreme events, we know from local tide gauge data and from observations that high tide flooding is occurring on average 2 to 3 days per week in Hampton already. We have seen the effects of rising seas on New Hampshire's coastal properties, roads, public facilities, human health, public safety, economy, and natural resources. Projections show that if global greenhouse gas concentrations stop going up by the end of the century, coastal New Hampshire is likely to experience between 0.5 foot and 1.3 feet of sea level rise by 2050, and from 1 to almost 3 feet by 2100. But much higher amounts of sea level rise are possible. Something new that we have learned from local research is that coastal groundwater levels will rise as sea levels rise. Groundwater rise is projected to extend up to 3 miles inland from the coast. This is about 3 to 4 times farther inland than tidal water inundation from sea level rise. The amount and extent of groundwater rise is influenced by different factors, such as geology and the proximity to streams and freshwater wetlands. Rising groundwater impacts drinking water quality, septic systems, roads, basements, and other underground infrastructure, as well as natural resources like wetlands. Storm surge is the rise in water level above the normal tide as a result of a storm. Studies suggest that future storms could become more intense and more frequent due to warming oceans. We can expect more impacts from storm surge in coastal New Hampshire due to both greater storm intensity as well as rising seas. Predictions also suggest that as sea levels rise, ocean currents will increase, especially during storms, resulting in more erosion, which puts property, infrastructure, and wildlife habitat at risk. Today, one-day extreme precipitation events along New Hampshire's coast now drop between 1 to 2 more inches of rain than they used to in the 1950s. The frequency of extreme precipitation events is projected to rise over the course of the next several decades, especially in the springtime. This will likely result in a bigger risk of flooding. We have seen freshwater flooding in coastal New Hampshire increase in magnitude and frequency over the past 4 decades in response to both more precipitation and a rise in development in the coastal watershed. More development leads to more pavement and built surfaces, which are impervious and result in more runoff and less infiltration of stormwater. These trends are expected to continue upwards in the future as a result of both climate change and land use change. There is much more information to dig into in the science report, and the accompanying guidance document provides a framework for towns and consultants to use the information in decision-making, from master planning to updating zoning regulations and codes, to siting development or managing existing assets. You can find the science report at tinyurl.com/CFR This project was funded in part by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Office for Coastal Management under the Coastal Zone Management Act, in conjunction with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services Coastal Program.